All right, welcome everyone to Forward Focus. It is August 7th, so we are officially heading into the end of summer now, and we're going to start by taking a look at what's going on in the overall markets here. So I'm going to flip on over to our charts. And we'll begin here with the Nasdaq. Here's this measured move I was just mentioning as we were going into the start of class. So we've had essentially a shallow avalanche on the bigger time frames here. It's kind of a messy one, not, our textbook one, but we've got a pretty good one here. So what we have happening here is that we saw this go into kind of a false break on the upside here, where we were looking at momentum trying to shift like this, went into that measured move right at the high. There's a little baby 2T in there, little baby head and shoulders, and a little baby avalanche, and those all kind of kicked off the move on the downside. And right now what we're looking at is this measured move here zone. So that's what we're seeing right now. So this is something a lot of times it does have more potential just because of the way that it shifts on the larger time frames. So sometimes we can see that pull in a bit more. A more traditional shallow avalanche, you guys, would have a two-wave move that looked more like this up here. So it would come up, it would have your pullback, and then it would have the shift this way after a shift this way, where this would be the strongest, this would be weaker, and then this would be even weaker still. And that will give the best ones for, totally turning around. So not quite seeing that here, but still pretty smooth sailing so far today. Overnight, for those of you that were following along over the last couple of days, let me kind of back up here a little bit. What we were looking at originally here yesterday during League of Traders was the two measured moves here. So oftentimes this is going to create a really strong breakout on the upside. All right, so what we were looking at here on this was this two-wave move. And as I mentioned earlier, when that happens lower in a trend, you can usually get a pretty good parabolic move out of it. So if this was just coming off of a lows here, that would be a beautiful zone for a breakout. But when we back this up, you guys, I'm gonna go way back here. Look at where this is on a daily extension. So see how this compares to a lot of these other impulse waves in the past? You're right up there. So not great trend placement for that. We did get a good breakout, but it also meant that it could have a harder time, that it could struggle more with that move. We can see here it was coming up to the upper end of a megaphone too. So it had that going on. And then what I was talking about yesterday is we're kind of going into the end of the day. Some of you folks were, and me too, we're trading some of the smaller time frame reversal patterns. And I'm going to scroll this back there. So we had little bitty setups like momentum reversal plus. So these are great as a small time frame setup, but if you pulled it back and you looked at what was happening on the bigger time frames, like the 3000 tick here, this has that scary stuff going on. It's harder to get a really strong, solid reversal off of something like that. So if you look for too much, you could easily get flushed out. These are the ones that have a better chance of not going to the main targets that you're looking for. So for example, momentum reversal. The main target you're going to hit most of the time is going to be right here. And then of course, in a major trend reversal, that's going to keep going. But if this is a ballet toe, like this here, it might only come to here and never make it down to here, let alone even further. So this is why it's so important to pay attention to what is going on the larger time frames. And it's also where, if you guys were hanging out here after League of Traders yesterday and into last night, we followed this last night. So in League of Traders yesterday, I said, hey, you guys, watch that queen, pay attention. Kind of scary. I'm going to scroll on up. And then I posted a chart afterwards and I said, hey, you know, something like this, that is going to have the better odds of a bigger correction, a lower risk correction, because then the momentum is shifting on that bigger time frame, not just the smaller time frame. So look at what happened. No, it wasn't as picture perfect as I drew it, but it did the exact same deal there, you guys. And that had then the smaller setups in here coming off of that high. So way better setups. So look at that here. We've got the template that I drew before there was anything going on over there to show how this would give you a lower risk setup without as much of the scary heebie-jeebers that the setups up in here would offer. So yeah, this might have been a little scary here. It's a small, tilted, shallow avalanche after the flush, but the flush is actually a good thing because it takes folks out that got in too early. And that's the benefit of a 2T is it flushes those people out, you guys, so that you don't have as much of a risk. So this is more akin to trying to catch a falling knife up here. That's why if you're trying to trade those, you use advanced trade management and you get really darn aggressive with how you protect your gains on those. You might still see them, but they're only on the small setups, small time frames. They're not on the bigger time frames. If you waited, especially if you guys were hanging out with us last night, you could see that we got the better, lower risk setups later. And then this one particularly, nice, beautiful avalanche. Gold actually was doing the same thing. Gold had really good setups, same patterns as we went into overnight. So as you guys are thinking about, you know, is it a good time to swing trade or position trade, or is it day trade? Think of things like this. You know, if this time frame here in the background, this 1,000 tick chart is actually a daily chart, then sure, you might get a week or two of a pullback, but you have less of a chance of getting that bigger one for what would be another couple of weeks. You'd have to wait for that to develop. So really don't forget to look at those larger time frames, you guys, because that's going to be the difference between where you've got to go and just treat it. And I traded that, the early one. This is how I traded it. So see here, and I warned everybody in Forward Focus, or in not Forward Focus, but in the forum, that hey, this is a Baleto. So what we had here was I just did the two-wave move. It came into the middle zone. It never hit what would be the typical momentum reversal target. And then I did it again when it did the momentum reversal plus. But again, I didn't look for the bigger downside move. So I actually got out of it here. It did go lower, but what it did was it did it like that into the last half an hour of the day. So it wasn't exactly pretty. It was a lot of back and forth. Eventually, it got down into here, which is your main momentum reversal plus target, but it took a while to get there. And there was a lot of back and forth here. So you can see I still used advanced trade management. I only grabbed part of it because I do a lot of executions building into and out of positions. But I just showed you some of what I did up here to decrease my risk on the trade. And you do the same thing with these, and then it's easier. You don't have as much risk involved, but make sure you understand advanced trade management. So you guys keep that in mind when you're looking at what's going on the larger time frames here. That was the ES. And yeah, so a little bit of a lesson in there. We had a nice 2B here just a second ago. You guys see that? Right there. So this had the measured move, and then it went to the 2B. And I don't remember what that support level is. Obviously, it's something that I put on earlier on a chart. It's funny though, because I've had this on here for a couple days, and look at how perfectly that hit. I don't even know what compelled me to put that there, but anyways, that's the cool thing about a lot of the tools I use for support and resistance, like Fibonacci. I can leave them on there for days, forget about where I drew them, but they still keep hitting and holding. This is actually another fib level right here. This is 76.4 on another chart. Not on this one, but there's another fib level there. And then this is a 123.6 on another that I must have drawn like a day or two ago or something, but it's kind of bouncing back and forth there. So larger time frames, let's go scroll back here. We're looking at the daily here. So we're pretty extended on the daily. You can see there's no main pattern here. It's trying to do maybe a megaphone. It's not perfect though, because the distance between the two highs is too close together. It's a little bit tight in there. So we don't have a slightly higher high is good to really serve that second trap, but that's what's going on in here. So intraday, it's a good zone to be looking for reversal strategies, but we still have to watch that momentum on the bigger time frames. It's not perfect, because if we look at this larger time frame, like the weekly here, there's no additional momentum shift. So take the same idea I was talking about yesterday and realize if this went and did something like that, well, then you've got a momentum shift here compared to here. That has a better chance of giving you a much stronger reversal if that happens. So kind of treating things a little bit more cautiously here, because the upside, again, really decent strength here on this impulse wave. So you can see what happens in the past. The stronger impulse waves, this one was weaker impulse wave that had a faster correction. Stronger ones have, more congestion, kind of slower, not necessarily going to give you a really rapid reversal. Some of them will do a V-top. The odds just aren't as good. So you'll want to look for like rounded highs or something in here. So for example, if we back this up and we look at the 3,000 or 1,000 tick here, look at that V top there, right? Right at that measured move, V top. But you go over here, this is that V top on the bigger time frame. You have a little baby 2T up here, then you've got a head and shoulders, and then you've got an avalanche. So you actually have all of those reversal patterns forming up here. So anyways, good mini lesson here to start out our day, and also give us an idea of what we can expect as we go into next week. Good chance it could be choppy. We're looking at a zone where corrections are certainly higher probability, but we don't really know for sure how that correction is going to play out, because we don't have that shift on a bigger time frame yet. Let's show you guys what this is looking at like on the S&P 500. So here, again, S&P 500. Look at that. We don't have any shift here. So when I'm looking at this as like a reversal, yeah, okay, there's a little bit of a shift here. We've got greater strength here, a little bit slower here, a little bit slower here. but it's not extremely slower. So this is starting to get to a point where we could have more flushes, but it might even go and do something like that again before we really get a bigger correction. Interestingly, that would put us into November, which election time. Funny how that is, right? Yeah. So if this plays out according to one of our hypothesized patterns, that would be right into November. The market knows. Yep, it does. So I actually kind of leaning towards that. I wouldn't be surprised if we see like another high in September. So as far as like, looking at distances between highs, you could measure spacing between the highs up here. That would be one good way that we could pay attention to that as we go into there. So it doesn't really tell me so much what to expect next week though, because this momentum, yeah, it's not extreme, but it's still faster than average. So I'm not, too gung-ho with like a setup as we go into next week. I think that I want to wait, see what starts to unfold on the smaller time frames. So like here, you can see we're coming up on a measured move here. It's probably around 76.4% extension or so coming out of this congestion, and it's a little bit slower. So this could easily be something that we see turn around into next week. We could get some early stages of that trying to turn around here today. Might get some of the bigger setups showing up at the beginning of next week. But if we look here, so we've got time correction starts to do price correction. So, there's always the possibility we could still get some slightly higher highs here. There's a double top. This is one, again, you could use advanced trade management. Start to try out and test a correction at the early stages. Short, take part, short, take part, short, take part. Kind of build into a position. So if it does go, hits a new high, it's a scratch trade, but ends up holding here and we flush into early next week, then you've got a really good position there. So we saw that with some of the overnight setups being the good places to do that in, like the 2T. My chart got stuck there. So here's the 2T over here. So like that, so you might have done 2T, take part, short the megaphone, take part. We were actually looking at this pattern as it was coming into the support here. Short the setup over here that a lot of you guys were doing. Take it off. And you're not fully out of a short. You're just building up each time back to full size and then taking some out. And then when you start to get a break where the momentum picks up, then you add back in really strongly to go with the bigger time frames. So that's what advanced trade management is. We do a lot of weeks in League of Traders where we focus just on that. There's also a boot camp available if anyone's interested. Just email help@tonyhansen.com and they can get you into that boot camp for advanced trade management. Let's see here. So I'm going to go look at some of the other markets. Got a little bit of a wonky Phoenix attempt here on the dollar yen. Let's look at the daily time frame. Daily time frame doesn't have really great timing for anything in here except for potential for like a two-wave move up into here, and then it might try to hold that again. That's what I would suspect is going to happen. That it's going to try to push back up here with a second wave up, and then we'll react again off of that zone. Our Aussie. If someone's able to count the waves properly, you almost have no issue for entering, right? Yeah, I mean, as when you start to really understand wave count and like trend development, and you have to factor in momentum, that's going to be just really awesome. I gave a discussion in the forum here this morning, so go back and read through that. We had a really good discussion on that, a couple of them actually. So here's a 2T. We were looking at the 2T on the Aussie dollar. Tried to do it with a little baby 2T last week, didn't quite do it. Now it's trying to do it with a momentum reversal. So this again is something where we're looking at, probability of some more downside in here. It looks a little still loading here on the 60 minute and 240 minute, but you've got a pretty decent short strategy here on the daily time frame of the Aussie dollar. So this is a good one to be looking at intraday for shorts. Come on, my intraday is not loading very well. There we go. Look at that nice parallel channel going on in there. And then you got this double tap up here. Kind of shifted momentum, got a little baby avalanche in there. So this is looking pretty good. Sometimes something like this, it can go pull in here and then go and do a momentum reversal plus, which would look like this. I gave a lot of examples of that in our forum too. So that is something you want to watch when it comes down into that zone there. It's more something that if the daily is kind of more iffy. So like this momentum here on this 2T, that's pretty average momentum. So it's not really slower than average yet. We have, the big main move. The second move was still really strong. So the third move was still pretty average. So it sometimes might go and try to do something like a momentum reversal plus just to switch it so that it's slower than average to get a stronger move, but we don't necessarily have to see that happening right away. So a typical target would be here. So, maybe it goes and it does a head and shoulders. That's something here. We don't really know for sure how that momentum is going to play out yet. The stronger it starts, though, the better the odds it's going to hit there without pausing much. So if it's just you're in the short and it's just kind of chopping along and it's pulling down with the same momentum as it did on the upside, that zone of support there is going to be better, and it might try to go for a bigger momentum reversal. So you really have to watch that follow through momentum. But on this, we do have a 2T with a momentum reversal here. Pull up the Euro Swiss. Let me get some of the other stuff loading in the background here too on some of the other charts. That's a good example of kind of like a momentum reversal plus. So see how that kind of pulls down there? It shifts momentum here. We don't see like the full easy 3 highs here, but we do see the shift. And so when this starts to come down out of that shifting momentum, it just overlaps a lot. And that's what makes it higher probability could flush back and then go. So you can see it's really similar to the Aussie dollar, but you don't have like 3 really clear-cut highs up here. That's just Netflix on the 15-minute. Netflix on the daily chart looks to pull lower, but mostly range bound. So you've got your 2-wave move up here. And then again, this is something where it could flush because that second wave is bigger than the first and stronger. So it can go for a third move. And again, we saw that this morning in the forum. So this is stronger. So it could do a third before it tries to fully react. We actually have a little teeny tiny momentum reversal plus on the Nasdaq right now. I'm just going to show you guys what that looks like. Whoa, where'd it go? Oh, here. So 1, 2, 3 highs, and then see how it ends up pulling back in here? Slower. Doesn't really make it all the way down there. And then it goes and does 2 waves, moves up, and that's your plus. So that's a little example there. We only have one leg up though, so it's not a great location for a momentum reversal plus. There's a better chance it could turn out to be like a tilted phoenix or something like that. But we do have that pattern in here. So again, if you try these, use advanced trade management. You short it, you take off partials. If it fails, it's not a big deal. If it goes into an avalanche, you add back in and you lower your overall risk on the trade. See if any of these are pulling up for us here. All right, we got a euro yen. Can see some old fib levels on there on the 60-minute. Get those off. So here's a 2B on this week, on this daily time frame. So really strong momentum coming out of that. So look at this right here, you guys. What do you see here? What was I just saying? 1, 2, 3. So you have that strong middle zone, allows for this third push. That actually is exhausting this here now. So this does have room for a bigger correction here as we go into next week. Let me show you guys a good example of this based upon what we were chatting about in the forum this morning. Right here, same thing, look at that. Just flip it over. Exact same concept. So this would be something good to watch. And today for reversal patterns, you can see there's actually a 2T right here overnight. So we have this coming up here. This is really steep, and then it goes to a shallower 2T right here, where it changes the momentum. So it's actually trying to kick off that correction. Let's see. Euro Swiss. Good rounded low, good shift here, popped. Now it's just kind of eh. It might be doing a tilted continuation, but I don't really like to trade something like this. There's way too much overlap, one bar to the next. So I wouldn't touch something like that. You can see it's really, really choppy. We got a nice little 2B in here. You know, we're still seeing patterns in there, but I wouldn't trade it. Let's see. I want something smoother. Oops, we already looked at that. Forex. Look at our loonie. Takes a minute for some of these things to load up here for us. You missed the days the loonie was stronger. We got our Canadians in here. Yeah, sorry about that, Nicole. That momentum reversal, you guys can actually see is momentum reversal plus on the Nasdaq is actually trying to play out there. So on our daily here, our loonie, let me clear this. Got a little bit of that kind of 2B action in here where look at this, one, big, small. So this could actually be pulling up here throughout August. Worth watching there. So I would be expecting more for strength here on the loonie as we go through August, trying to hold on to the support that we've got going on over here. Got some folks asking about stocks, so we'll pull up some of those stocks. Online shopping. That's why she wants it to be stronger. BIIB. So what you've got here is it's a breakaway gap, but it's also an exhaustion gap. So because this is a measured move here, and it's really similar to a ton of the other impulse wave sizes, it's really hard for that to keep going at this point. So intraday, you got an uphill battle here. So it's a good one to play intraday plays as gaps. Actually, you guys, look at these gap plays here on the downside. It's beautiful. You got this nice check mark for short setup. You got the shallow avalanche. You got another check mark here. Another two wave there. So you got a pretty good action here to close the gap zone. And then two main waves down, third one starts to shift the momentum. So we're at support here now on that intraday. I don't think I would do too much with this on bigger time frames, but let's go see what's going on this on the weekly. Or not. Yeah. Monthly. I used to trade this back in the day, but it's not been great for short-term trading for a long time. You guys can see why here. It's kind of trying to go into a longer range. Looks like we could even get a breakout eventually on this thing again. By the way, that Nasdaq, let me show you guys what it just did. Did what we just talked about. So see? Here was the momentum reversal plus, and then like I said, it's actually had better probability that it was going to go into a tilted phoenix. And that's what we're getting kind of coming out of there. So it hit the support and then basically treated this like wave one of a correction. This is wave two of a correction. TDC, another one, big gap here. Rounding. Intraday, you can see it's almost the exact opposite of what we were looking at intraday on BIIB. So you had that check mark, you had it again, you have it again, and it's basically just doing the opposite of what we saw on BIIB. So kind of cool how you can take those and just flip them over, and it's going to help you determine, hey, should you be looking for longs or shorts, just based upon some of those early setups there. On this, let's go look at longer term. So you're coming off of a double bottom here, and it kind of shifted into that. That's actually really good. So this is something that can hold up better longer term. I wouldn't be as concerned about this one here. Sure, you're going to get some intraday exhaustion, especially, you know, when you come up to probably right about here, 2650-ish, 27 zone. That's going to be probably your main first exhaustion here. I wouldn't even worry too much about the previous high too much. It's basically just treating this like a type of phoenix. And so this zone over here with more of a measured move there, this is usually stronger. All right, let's do a couple more here. So question on TDOC. We have what we call like a really steep phoenix, steep 2T up here. You can kind of see it starting to shift the momentum, but it's not a clear-cut setup, so it's not an easy one. Really fast, rapid drop to start with. So a lot of times those continuations are a lot slower. So they can pull back up into the range easier. What can happen a lot of times with something like this is it might kind of creep down like that and then come back up into the range. So it's not as easy of like a great setup here on the larger time frames. Weekly looks pretty exhausted. We've got basically really steep 2T on that weekly chart. Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to try to come into this zone in here, but there's no real good setup for it right now, because really what you have here is a time correction. So even though it had the really sharp drop there, just like this did over here, overall, it's still a time correction. So with that being the case, it could easily just chop around in here more. So I'd kind of stay away from this right now. I wouldn't get too worried one way or the other right now. I think if it comes lower, it's probably going to go slower as it pulls back. You probably get some bounces as it comes into support levels again, that'll come back in. So it'll give you time to adjust if you are long, like longer time frame setup, and you're looking for second chances to get out. And it could even conceivably do another push on that chart here too, if it goes and bases out a little bit longer. That's a good example of a phoenix on space on the daily. Here's a nice avalanche within this breakdown here on the 5 minute. You guys see these avalanches? So we got a baby one right here, goes into a bigger one. You got one coming out of that there, and then you got one down here. So a lot of them coming out of ranges. All right, we'll look at two more here. Oops. So Zynga, this is a good example of a really steep 2T, and then it goes and does another one to shift that momentum. So that's what we've got going on here. This, more likely to continue the correction in here. You'd have to drop down to just trading the smaller intraday timeframes at this point. There's nothing right here on this intraday. Good example of an extreme move, and then when it tries to continue, it's not as intense as it was on the first drop. In this case, there was a little bit of an extra flush with the open, but the overall channel is like this. You guys, you can see that here. These often start to go into zones of where it's just going to overlap a ton. Again, a good example of really extreme drop, and then it just doesn't go as fast on the continuation. So it starts extreme, overall slower. Still pretty fast, but or compared to like normal. This is more extreme, this is less, this is less. So these can get to zones where they pop and start to go like that. That's what you're usually going to be expecting to happen in more of a zone like this. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for joining me here today and offering up some things for us to take a look at. So I'm going to wrap this on up, and we will get it over there to YouTube for you so you can go back and review. And I do recommend doing that, if for nothing else, just to study the lessons from when we first got into our session here today. All right, you guys, have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see y'all back here next week.